Let's learn about the cerebral aqueduct. We can learn it from the 3 by 4 rule. So cerebral aqueduct is also known as the aqueduct of Sylvius. So it is actually 3 by 4 inch long or 1.8 centimeter long, and it is going to connect the third and fourth ventricle. And the direction of the CSF flow is also going to be from the third ventricle towards the fourth ventricle, and it is going to be surrounded with the ependyma, and it is going to be made up of gray matter entirely or central gray. It does not have a choroidal plexus. Let's talk about the fourth ventricle. The fourth ventricle is a tent-shaped cavity which is filled with CSF, as you can see here, and it is present anterior to the cerebellum and posterior to the pons and the superior half of the medulla. It is going to be lined with the ependyma and continues above with the cerebral aqueduct of midbrain and below with the central canal of the spinal cord. Now let's talk about its parts. It has a roof which is going to be tent-shaped as well, and it has a rhomboid or diamond-shaped floor, and it has lateral boundaries. Lateral boundaries have a caudal and cranial part. Caudal part, or the inferior part, made up of the inferior cerebellar peduncle, and the cranial part is made up of the superior cerebellar peduncle. Now let's talk about its roof or the posterior wall. The roof is going to be superiorly made up of 2 superior cerebellar peduncles and 1 superior medullary velum, which is made up of white matter. And the inferior part of the roof is going to be made up of inferior medullary velum. Inferior medullary velum is going to be made up of thin sheet of ventricular ependyma. It does not have nervous tissue, and the posterior covering is made up of pi matter. And the inferior medullary velum is going to be pierced in the midline by a large medial aperture or the foramen of Magendie. So in the same way as we open the zip of a tent from here, the foramen of Magendie is going to open the zip of the camp like this inferiorly. So this is basically what we call the median aperture, which is very large. So lateral recesses are also present, and they are going to continue around the sides of the medulla and anteriorly open as the foramen of Leschka. The cavity of the fourth ventricle communicates with the subarachnoid space through 1 median opening and 2 lateral apertures. They permit the flow of CSF from ventricular system into subarachnoid space. Now let's talk about what we found. So in the floor, we found a diamond. Let's talk about the floor. The floor is made up of the posterior surface of the pons and the cranial half of the medulla. It is symmetrically divided into 2 halves by a median sulcus. And on each side of the sulcus, we have the median eminence. The lateral side of the median eminence is going to be bounded by the sulcus limitans, which is going to be laterally bounded by the vestibular area. So we can remember all of this with MMSV. The vestibular nucleus is under the vestibular area. Now let's talk about facial colliculus. Now please remember that we're going to talk about one thing each. So first of all, we're going to talk about the medial eminence. So please remember MIF. In the inferior part of the medial eminence, we're going to find a facial colliculus. So here we are going to find a very strange structure that the 7th nerve is looping over the 6th nerve. What came next? Sulcus limitans came next. So now let's talk about the sulcus limitans in a little bit of detail. So for the sulcus limitans, please remember that at the superior end, there is going to be substantia ferruginea, which is going to be pigmented. Now let's talk about something else, which is the median sulcus. Stria terminalis is going to come from the median sulcus or from the arcuate nucleus, and it is going to enter into a very strange structure. So what do you see here? You see the cerebellum. It is going to enter the cerebellum through the inferior cerebellar peduncle, which came from the vestibular area, which came from the median eminence. Now let's talk about the stria terminalis in more detail. So in the stria terminalis, the features are going to be reorganized. The structure of 11 is going to be present medially, most medially, and then laterally we're going to find the structure of 10, which is the vagal triangle. So hypoglossal triangle is present more medially, and lateral to this is the vagal triangle, and inferior part of vestibular area is going to be lateral to the vagal triangle. Beneath it lies the vagal nucleus. And area postrema is going to be present between 10 and ventricle, which is the narrow area between the vagal triangle and the lateral margin of the ventricle, rostral to the central canal opening. Facial colliculus is a slight swelling at the inferior end of the medial eminence. Now let's talk about the choroidal plexus of the. So it has a T shape, and vertical part of the T is double, as I have drawn here, and it is suspended from the inferior half of the roof of the ventricle, and it is formed from highly vascular tela choroida, and the blood supply is from the posterior inferior cerebellar artery or the pica. Function is the CSF reduction.